Hey, some words about the upcoming lunar eclipse. It's gonna happen tomorrow night, actually, very early in the morning after the night, at least here in Iceland. And yeah, there is a lunar eclipse. What does it mean? And it is partial lunar eclipse. So, a simple way to understand the moon cycle have two polarities, the full and the empty moon. And these are exactly the points as well that eclipses can happen, only in these two poles. And it is related to each other. It is all about the dynamic between Earth, Moon, and Sun, this triangle, which is, in a way, the most relevant dynamic from an astronomical perception towards the structure of our psyche. So, as a person, this is the planetary body, Earth, and this is what we regularly experience. In a way, Earth goes around the Sun. The Sun is like the next level of hierarchy. The Moon is the previous level of hierarchy. The Moon goes around the Earth and in a way is included as part of Earth. Let's say from the Sun perception, Earth and the Moon is kind of the same. It's together. And it can be even said so that the structure of our psyche is because this is the cosmic position we are at. You know, for example, Venus have no moon or Mars have two moons that affect the dynamic within the persona that would evolve there. This is, of course, a theory. And from that place as well, someone in another solar system, maybe binary solar system with two suns, so as well that will affect. And how would these things affect is by understanding the dynamic within the psyche. What does it mean the sun, what does it mean the planet, and what does it mean the moon? So intuitively we associate generally the awareness, the consciousness, like let the light of awareness shine upon something that you will become conscious about, and then what is kept in the shadow is what you are unconscious about. It's kind of a parallel or an outcome of that light dynamic in the cosmos. A sun is sourcing from within itself light. The sun recognizes the celestial bodies that moves around it by seeing its own light reflecting back from the planets. The sun's light reflecting back. And every planet reflects back a very specific aspect of the sun. And the source of light within the psyche, it's the awareness, which become conscious to whatever repeats cyclically around it again and again. So it becomes familiar. There is recognition of it. So it's becoming the structure of consciousness. In a way to say, this specific sun we are in its solar system have this specific amount of planets which kind of describe its specific structure of psyche, because these specific reflections of itself, the self which is the sun, are reflected back. And the planet have one side that is reflecting back to the sun its light, and another side that is in the dark, that is in the shadow. Every planet is largely to say half in the light, half in the shadow. Some planets have moon or moons. Some have many moons. And moon as well have half in the light and half in the dark, sometimes more than half in the dark, sometimes all of it, like in a lunar eclipse. The difference is that the planet circles around the sun. The moon circles around the planet. And what does that mean? So the sun is in a way where the planet will is directed towards. Earth, Jupiter, Venus, the will of the planet is directed towards the sun. So it's circling to the sun. Like these specific reflections of the awareness are striving towards awareness. The moon's will is directed towards the planet, which is not a source of light, which is having light and dark side. And in a way, the will of the moon is not towards awareness, not towards becoming more aware, but towards that shape, that specific reflection, that idea, that identity, specific identity, and not the self itself, which is reflecting itself back through the planets, through specific reflections. So the moon's will is towards a specific reflection. So in a way it wants to keep it. And there forms persona in Jungian terms. This is like called persona, what the planet represent. It's like there is ego today is used in many terms, but originally it's just the definition of self. It's not necessarily a negative thing, or for sure not something to get rid of. It's an existence of a self means an ego. But we can interpret it as well to a soul. It's actually the same thing in that sense. or towards a self, or towards a consciousness. It's all the same thing in that sense, in the original meaning of an ego. But maybe to keep confusion, so let's call it consciousness, and then the planetary, which originally called persona, let's call it human. So a consciousness can manifest as human. Human, let's say this is part of the planet. This is what you see now talking in the video. And human on earth have another side going around it, which is the moon, which is again in Jungian terms what is called the shadow, or in Freudian it's more the subconscious, unconscious, that is the subconscious, which can act like a separate entity, or the id in a way also represent it. And so there is me who is conscious towards some things, and I have my own will as a person that meet other persons. And then I have the shadow aspect, which is sometimes I do something I don't really want to do, but from some reason I do because I have these patterns from either my education or my ancestry or whatever. I have a certain pattern that acts through me, and I'm not aware of even. So that is the shadow aspect that is acting through. And the shadow aspect can be from the planet position, can be more seen in the light, which means the light of consciousness shines upon it, more or less. Sometimes it is completely in the dark, like in empty moon. And sometimes it's completely in the light, like in full moon. And these cycles are repeating as well within the psyche. So the human aspect is the side within the consciousness that meets another human and recognize the other as a subject as well, like I am a subject, which also can evolve together an objective perception, relatively objective, and that part in us that meets another. This is basically the persona. This is part of the ego in these, or that part of the soul that meets another, as if there is a meeting, because from the pure soul perception we don't meet anyone, we are already all united, so there was no separation in the first place. But a soul or a consciousness can go into a transpersonal experiences, like being a soul, for example, or like experiencing other worlds, other realities, even other perceptions, like I am an archetype that is manifesting, like a specific god, or God itself as the absolute ego can also be an experience of a self. So all these are within the range of consciousness. It's like what the sun represents in the psyche. And this sun, and it can open, of course, into the galaxy, and there are many types of suns, all circling the black hole, which in a way it's another level of the hierarchy, that pure mystery. that void that is not dark because it is in the shadow. It is pure darkness. It's where every relativity collapses into singularity. And still, this is 2 levels up beyond planet, and within our interaction as humans, we are actually the planet in that sense. And the moon is our shadow aspect. And it's relevant because, we experience, like, when we look up to the sky and we can see some events that are common to all of us. So the full moon and empty moon are such type. Same like 2 weeks ago, the solstice as well. It's a planetary event. It is, in a way, if we create a natural religion that is truly global, transcultural, trans lineage, it's like it would be these events that are similar to all of us. Basically, there are the year cycle, which have the alignment like the solstices basically, and then the moon cycles. These are the main cycles we experience during a lifetime of a person as the main cycle, the significant ones. Of course, the other planets do as well cycles, and there are all types of cycles also related to the dynamic with the sun and with the galaxy as well. But these are like with the galaxy, these are really long cycles. And the year and the month, they are the main cycles we experience regularly. Of course, based on the most basic cycle, which is the cycle of day and night, which we count in 24 hours, although it can be counted in other types of divisions as well. But yeah, the day and night cycle, it's the planet circling itself. It's like me dealing with myself. It's all about me, like the rituals of that cycle, the midday, the midnight as the polarities, and of course the sunrise, sunset as kind of the equators, parallel to the equinoxes in the year or to the half moon in the month. These are eventually the 3 main cycles we experience that are also within our life experienced many times. Therefore, the main holidays that are relevant to celebrate together would be those, in particular, more the polarities than the equinoxes, because they kind of hold more certain of an extreme, so they are more significant. And specifically in the full and the empty moon, there are also the occurrences of eclipses sometimes. So what does it mean? An eclipse and the full and empty moon. When there is a full moon, so the shadow aspect, the unconscious, is actually fully shined upon by the light of consciousness. It is an opportunity, a natural opportunity, symbolically representing all of us, focus on being fully conscious of our unconscious, what is regularly unconscious, to more or less degree. And the opposite, when it is empty moon, it's exactly the opposite, is to go into the dark aspect, is to meet it as a mystery and not as something known. And it can be, in a way, a representative for I don't know how many of you know these terms, the path of ascension and the path of descension, the two ways um, to, in a way, transcend this duality. For example, in the path of ascension, I realize I am not my feelings, my thoughts. I'm not this body. And I ascend above it. And many spiritual paths direct towards that. And the thing there, if this is the only way, it's just half of a cycle, which then numbs the more it's like very ascetic in a way, and it numbs the pleasure, or the, in its deeper meaning, it numbs the power. It does not allow the dragon to wake up, the kundalini, what is called in the Vedic tradition, or the raw life force, the wild aspect of it, which then in descension, going all the way to the most gross and raw and wild aspect, it leads towards the sexuality. We can even see it in the body. One pole, other pole of the cycle. It's like the brain, the head, the pineal gland, and the sexual organs. It's in the bottom. And also where all the shit is, like what we shame and what we judge. And in a way, when we unite these two as polarities, not by choosing one and condemning the other, or in some materialistic perception is choosing one and condemning the other. And when we integrate these both, we can evolve in one aspect the power, in another aspect the enlightenment. We can unite them together. We can bring the enlightenment into larger manifestation. We can take the power into wisdom. And the moon cycle, in a way, represents this polarity as well. I mean, its basic polarity, it can be represented also in the year cycle. But the moon is in its relation to our shadow. So, the path of ascension, in a way, bypasses the shadow, just saying, I'm not identified with my shadow and I'm not owning it, if to take it to the extreme, and numbing the shadow. And then there can be some patterns occurring sometimes. So, okay, so I'll go far from where there are challenges that challenge me, which eventually sexuality is the most challenging. But any challenges, I'll just go to the mountains, I'll live in a monastery, and I'll focus all the time on holy scriptures and so on. So the other side of going into the shadow, I'll just I mean, this is in a way consecrating the shadow. Like to go to a radical materialistic, I don't care about anyone, I just care about me. I'll get as much money as possible, me and maybe my friends and family, in a better case, and I'll just get power on the price of others and experience it as some kind of survival reality or competition type of reality. And this is basically where the shadow expresses itself in its dominancy within the persona. And again, the moon does not have any celestial object going around it, but the sun is going around another celestial object, which may be even going around something else. It becoming very abstract beyond that so far in the current physics. But the path of ascension generally leads further, but without going all the way towards the bottom of descension, we cannot fully integrate ourselves with the next level. In a way, if we're not fully owning the moon as part of the earth, we cannot really shift the perception as a solar perception to experience how the soul perceive the person. And therefore it is important to integrate fully the shadow. And it's in two ways. In one side, it's to go into it and explore it, which is in the empty moon. And then in the full moon is to not identify with it and just observe, which is happening tomorrow night. And then when an eclipse occurs, it's in a way the planet blocks the light of the sun that shines on the moon, which reflects back to the planet. Sun as consciousness, planet as me or you, and the moon as the subconscious. And the reflection of the moonlight towards the earth is the part of the subconscious which I acknowledge. So when the persona hides the consciousness from showing itself the shadow aspect, there is like when there is, this would not be a full lunar eclipse, but let's say a full lunar eclipse, then in a case like that, it's like the persona says in the full moon time, then the moon is not visible. It's like, I don't have a shadow anymore. I am fully enlightened, in a way to say, if interpret enlightenment in this way. Of course, it can be much debated on what does this term mean. In another side, if there is solar eclipse, then the moon hides the sun. The shadow hides consciousness. It's like the shadow takes over. It's like a certain desire takes over and bring us to forget our true essence, our soul, our existence as consciousness. And in a way, 2 times a year or 1 time in 2 years, depends, there is kind of an invitation by the celestial objects to explore that state as a collective. Let's let the senses take over, or the sensuality. Oh, they smell so good, these leaves. And when the planet hides the moon from the light of the sun, this is exactly the opposite. Let's retreat. Let's go into full ascension. Let's meditate. Like Vipassana, like Zen, like let's not react to any sensation or impulse or desire. Let's just observe. It's invitation to this type of retreat. When it is partial lunar eclipse, so it's not fully, it is still to some degree more than when there is no eclipse. But generally in a full moon is like to experience the light more. And when there is the eclipse is to observe the shadow as something. It's as more it is eclipsed the moon, there is less acknowledgement of the shadow in a way, because the persona less owns it in a way. So, and it's in a way an invitation for the collective to experience as well that state, that oh, we actually don't have so much shadow, we are quiet and enlightened beings, this is like partial eclipse. Let's experience that and let's be, you know, let's touch that for that weekend. Actually, it happens in the weekend, and in other times it would be different because states of consciousness are dynamic. So yeah, these are some words. You're welcome to join us in the next time we do it soon.